Hey there, Grandpa. How's it going today? Hi. Hi. Okay, Grandpa, come now. Come back and take a seat. Yeah. Did you have a good week? Oh yeah, school's been great this week. What's that? You want to learn more about what I'm learning in class? Well, sure. It actually really applies to you. Grandma was telling me your recent blood results, and it looks like you got some kind of increased risk of getting atherosclerosis. Do you know what that is, Grandpa? Ah, I've seen a little bit about it. Well, I found a picture of it for you. So, you know, in our body we have blood vessels, right? They're gonna travel around and they're gonna carry the blood. Well, whenever you eat a lot of fatty foods, or even whenever you eat like carbohydrates, a lot of carbs will actually be converted to fat. And fat is not a bad thing. Fat is every single cell that's in our body. The outer part of that cell, it's called the cell membrane. It's actually made of fat and cholesterol. People talk about cholesterol and they make it this bad thing, but cholesterol, it's part of our cells. It helps actually form the outer part of the cells. It makes hormones, the messengers that are throughout our body. So fat's not a bad thing, but when you get too much of it, as you can kind of see in this picture right here, Grandpa, these yellowish white things, that's showing fatty buildup in your tissues. And so, there's kind of a balancing act with your diet and how much fat you're going to be eating. But I kind of wanted to give you some of the nitty gritty details, I guess, on what happens whenever you eat a fatty meal. So when you eat a fatty meal, Grandpa, this is you. Well, it's a drawing of you, but get the point. So whenever you eat a fatty meal, it's traveling down here and it gets to your stomach, and your stomach's breaking it down. This whole process, your food's breaking down, and you get to your intestines right here, and that's where you're really absorbing a lot of your food. And so in your intestines, your liver's going to secrete these things called bile acids, and what that does is it allows those fat molecules to be able to be broken down. Because when you think of fat, think of oil. Oil and water doesn't mix, right? So we have to get help to break that fat down. And so your liver uses these bile acids to break it down. And so what happens is, surrounding these intestines are these things called lymph nodes and lymph vessels that can form lymph nodes. And these lymph vessels will actually take this fat that's broken down, and this fat is put into these particles called chylomicrons. And the purpose of these chylomicrons, Grandpa, is it's because, as I was saying, fat and water, they don't mix. So if you had that in your bloodstream, fat, it doesn't work that way. It has to be, if you want to transport it throughout your body, not have it stick everywhere, you're gonna have to have it attached to something that can dissolve in water and move around in water, and those are proteins. So a chylomicron is a mixture of proteins and fats and cholesterol, and so that gets into these lymphs. And it's not shown in this picture, but imagine you have these lymph vessels that keep coming up here, and right along in here, it meets up with your bloodstream, and it travels down to where your heart would be. This picture, it's not in here, but in your heart, it's going to, all that fat's going to get distributed throughout your body. And what happens is, as those chylomicron particles are in the bloodstream, it actually reacts with, you ever heard of HDL? People talk about HDL, and it's the good form. LDL is bad, but HDL is good. So it reacts with HDL, and what happens is the HDL activates an enzyme. You know what an enzyme is, Grandpa? An enzyme is something that breaks something down. It's used to break down things. So HDL will give these chylomicrons this molecule that will allow them to activate an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase. And so what that's going to do is it breaks down those fat particles, those chylomicrons, into those free fatty acids. And it does that right at the capillaries. And what happens is those fatty acids travel into the muscles and into the tissue and into the fat. In the muscles, it's used for energy, especially if you're out walking around like you do, it burns it. And the fat, and this is kind of where it gets bad, it gets stored. So anyway, that's a very small picture of how everything's going. But that's kind of, a little bit of detail what's going on whenever you eat a lot of fatty foods. And so remember, Grandpa, everything in moderation. Yeah.